Thanks to everyone for being here and tuning in today. I am so pleased to introduce you all to Rachel Rose, our son Jack, who will be 4 at the end of the month. We are lucky enough to call Rachel our speech therapist. We first met Rachel over 3 years ago through our early intervention coordinator. Our former speech therapist went on leave, and Rachel was going to be the sub, and we never looked back. I remember really well when she joined the team. Some had been reluctant at that time to have Jack try solids, given his head and neck control was really weak. Our pediatrician on the other side was pushing hard and felt really strongly that we should not be passing the 6-month mark without having ventured into solids. So Rachel, with her can-do spirit and really smart approach, decided we were going to go for it. We really never looked back. I could speak for hours about our immense respect and appreciation for Rachel, what she's done for Jack. But I think it's really easy to say Jack would not be where he is today without her support, her enthusiasm, and just really a can-do mindset. Um, she never gives up. She's got great advice, everything from choosing a cup, picking a utensil, teaching straw drinking, gestures, sign language. I could go on, but I will talk a little bit about her professional credentials. But I loved sort of just sharing my own personal experience working with her and with Jack. Rachel Rose is the owner and founder of Creative Speech Therapy NYC. She is nationally certified through the American Speech and Hearing Association and state licensed in New York. Throughout her career, she's focused on working with children with multiple disabilities and significant needs. She speaks publicly about pediatric feeding, oral placement therapy, speech language, and social skills. So I'm really excited for this session today. If you have a question for Rachel, please use the question and answer box or use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can today as possible. If your question isn't answered during today's session, we'll be posting additional information and resources on the Pura conference website after the conference. So it is now my pleasure to turn the Zoom over to Rachel. Rachel, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Jean. That was such a nice, lovely introduction. I can't thank you enough. And it has been a pleasure working with Jack. And Jack is actually somebody that you guys will meet during today's session because I have some videos of me doing therapy with Jack. So that should be pretty exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation. So the title of my presentation is Getting into Your Child's World. And I'm just so excited to talk about this today because I feel like speech therapy is a real superpower. And I thought that when I first learned of the profession when I was 13, and I still feel like that today. And that's why I love working with kids like Jack, who, you know, you've really got to think through some of these things to figure out how to get into Jack's world and how to relate to Jack and figure out what's going to motivate, you know, kids like Jack to speak. So, you know, my firm belief really going into this is that every child has the ability to communicate, and it's really about finding that key that sort of opens them up. Some kids, you know, the communication will be more verbal. Some kids, it might be an augmentative communication device. Some kids, you know, it could be a number of different communication modalities, but that's my thought going into it. So I treat children as the child and not necessarily as the disability. Before I get too excited and too started here, a couple of disclaimers. One is that I am going to be talking about different therapeutic approaches and treatments. These are just approaches that I myself have used and have found to be very effective with multiple kinds of kids, but I'm not being paid to endorse them or anything like that. And then the second is I'm happy to give lots of advice today and answer so many questions, but you know, not knowing your child directly, you should always seek the help and information from someone who actually is working with your child. So Jean really took the intro from me there. So that was great. Yeah. I've been working as a speech therapist for about 17 years. I started in public schools, and there was a classroom for multiple intensive needs kids. And that's when I got into really working with children who were a little more complex, had a little more going on. As a result of that, I took a lot of these specialized trainings that I've shown you on the right side of the page here. So I do a lot of feeding, orofacial myology. We could talk about that later. A lot of people know about prompt therapy. I'm going to talk more about these types of therapies as we go, because a lot of these are things that I'm going to be recommending in the talk. So I have a private practice on the Upper East Side, and I get to work with a lot of different kinds of children, and it's really fun. So my goal for you guys is really to learn two things today. The first is, I know I'm talking to a lot of parents out there, so I really want to teach you about different techniques that you can actually do at home to really help to facilitate communication. I don't accept that, children just aren't going to speak. I think that you can meet the child where they are and use certain techniques to really get into their world and teach them. So first is teaching you lots of different things that you can do in more of a systematic way to work with your child at home. And then the second is what I talked about before, different techniques that I've used that I think that I've actually used with Jack, but also many other children with multiple intensive needs who, and these techniques have benefited those children. Okay, so the first thing I thought we should do is just get on the same page with a couple of definitions. Speech therapists really are working on a couple of different areas. The first is speech. And when we say speech, what we're talking about are the different sounds that children or adults that we make. So, we've all heard of like a lisp. So a speech therapist would work on a lisp, which is saying the S sound incorrectly. So that's speech. In contrast, expressive language is the child's ability to put together words in order to form sentences. So their ability to express themselves. And the third area is receptive language, and that refers to the way that we understand language. So a lot of children will develop receptive language before expressive language. So we understand language before we actually can produce language. And that'll be important a little bit later on in our talk as well. But receptive language are things like following directions, answering questions, understanding what those around you are saying. So those are the three main areas. The fourth main area is social language, which we will talk a lot about today as well. Okay, so first I thought I would go over kind of what is the hierarchy of speech and language development, because when I'm called into a case, let's say a case where there's already a speech therapist present, what I try to do is really go back and figure out where that child is functioning. We as speech therapists really feel pressure to start at that turquoise and purple circle. We feel pressure to start at speech production and sounds. Parents say, you're a speech therapist, make my kid talk. And yes, that is the job. However, if you look at this chart, there are a lot of steps that go before that the level of making sounds and forming words. And so if children don't have these prerequisites, then it's like you're starting without the foundation of the house. You're building the walls, but you haven't laid the foundation. So in that respect, what I try to do is go look at the child, see where they are, see if I can really get into their world by doing some of these things. So let's get into some of them. Okay, here's techniques for you as parents at home to work on each level of development. So the first one is imitation of basic body movements. And, this is really fun, and it's really the first step. these kinds of imitations, I love to do like drumming back and forth or something like that, kind of very primal. But really, you're going to meet your kid wherever they are from a motor perspective. So you might even want to consult like a physical therapist to see, you know, can they bang a drum, that kind of thing. And then you're going to go through these steps. And these are pre-verbal steps of communication. So even though your child isn't necessarily talking, you're going to learn how to communicate with them. So I went through the different parts of your body that you could use to work on motor imitation with your kid. Motor imitation just means imitating some movement. So if it's hands, you know, going back and forth and clapping hands is super fun. You know, clap for your child. Maybe they can clap back for you. You could even put your hands over their hands and help them clap. Something as simple as shaking your head yes or no. I love when you ask kids, you know, what was that? And they give you like the shoulder shrug. I don't know. So even if they can't say that, sort of doing that move is fun. Changing their diaper, you could say, you know, PU, and they can go back through and say PU back. Blowing kisses. All of these things are things that you can do with your child and you can encourage them to do back to you. The basic foundation of communication is back and forth language with each other. And it doesn't have to be verbal language. It can be these really basic motor movements. So, you know, whatever your child is, you know, you can find something to do. If you can't find anything, go to the drumming. I love that as a first step. Okay, so once your child knows how to imitate body movements, then we're going to work toward the face. So body movements are a gross motor skill. Face movements are a fine motor skill. And children typically learn gross motor, which means the bigger movements, before they learn the fine motor movements, which are your like writing and smiling and things like that. Speech is a fine motor skill. So if children can't imitate fine motor skills, they're really going to have a hard time learning to speak. So let's go here. I broke this down again. So these are the different parts of our mouths that communicate. We move our lips to make an ooh. We flip our tongue up to make a T. We need our cheeks to round to make different sounds, and obviously our jaw. Vowels are actually mostly produced by how much you can open and close your jaw. So working on these underlying foundational skills are going to lay the foundation for your child to be able to say some of the sounds later on. So, I mean, these are so fun. Smiling back and forth, kissing back and forth, tickling, you know, a tummy, and then having the child laugh and you laugh back. Any of these techniques would be great for really getting what we call the pre-verbal imitation going. So these are, you're so close to getting to speech, but you're working on these underlying foundational skills. Under cheeks, I put a lot of blowing activities. We'll get into that in a little bit, but Jean mentioned straws before, straw drinking, bubble blowing, even putting that lollipop in their mouth and popping it out. These are all things that you guys can do back and forth. That is communication, because you're imitating each other, but you're also building foundational skills for speech. So that's your oral motor imitation section there. This is Finn, and I wanted to introduce you to him because Finn is someone that I've been working with since he was about 6 months to a year. And I was brought in because he wasn't making a lot of progress, and Finn was a tough kid. I was seeing him 3 times a week in his home for speech and language therapy and feeding. And he didn't say his first word until he was 3 years old. And I can't wait for you to see what happens with Finn, because it's a big success story. But so that you know, Finn is about to turn 5 in August, and he's going to start attending a regular education school. So he's made a lot of headway. Finn does not have Pure syndrome. Finn had some trauma as a child, and then when he started talking at 3, we found out we had apraxia, which is an oral motor issue. So doing oral motor imitation for Finn is going to be very difficult. And something that I should mention here is, therapy is very different from medical stuff, because therapy is the day-to-day, grind. It's small steps that make the big steps happen. And it's just a lot of daily practice, repetition, figuring this stuff out. So anyway, without further ado, Finn and I are working on oral motor imitation. So we're taking sips of water and then kind of doing that. It's delicious, the water. And you'll see that he starts to make that connection, and we're actually doing a back and forth. We're not saying anything, but he's able to imitate what I'm doing with my mouth. So here's Finn. Let's have our water. What do you say? Good. Let's have another sip. Ready? He really gets into it when he figures out that he can do it. So that's an example. We're not doing any words, we're not vocalizing, but we are moving back and forth and doing something together. Okay, once you've laid this foundation, now we get to controlled airflow. When you're sitting and listening to me talk right now, you're breathing in and out in a 50-50 way. So equally in, equally out. Whenever we breathe for speech, so what I'm doing is taking quick inhalations, and then I'm controlling a longer exhalation, because we speak on exhalation. So in order for a child to be able to say a word, more than 1 or 2 sounds, they have to be able to control the exhale of their speech. And so this is really critical. You can get all this imitation, but in order to coordinate speech, you really have to work on airflow. And this is a part that I think is critically important, that other speech therapists need to really focus on too, because this really lays the foundation for speech. And the best part about it is it's really fun to work on. This is my favorite aspect of the pre-verbal stage. So anything that requires blowing is the same breath support that you need for speech. So when you blow bubbles, you take a quick inhale, and then you take a long exhale to blow the bubbles. So bubbles are fantastic. Any kind of horns, like recorders or the slide horns or harmonicas, are great. Straw drinking, you also have to take a quick inhale, or you have to control your airflow to breathe in, to suck in the water. Blowing feathers, blowing tissues, and if you're really feeling excited, you can do candle blowing. So take little birthday candles and have them set up, and have your child go through and blow out the birthday candles. So when you're working on airflow, think blowing activities. Anything that you can blow is great for that activity. We're going to meet Jack, Jean's son, who is almost 4. In this next clip, Jack and I are actually working on a couple of things. We're working on vocalization, so the next step after breath support. And I'm sort of explaining to Jean what I'm working on and that sensation of the lips. And here Jack blows, and it's one of the first times he's done it. So we've been working on coordinating breath support, but Jack actually got it, and the bubble was very motivating for him. So here is Jack, and you'll hear me do a lot of chatter, but watch for the bubble blowing. That's what is key here. Pop. Yay! More. Okay, ready? Jack, bubble, set, pop. Yay! Pop, pop, pop. Good job.
Good job, Jackie.
I'm trying to increase his awareness of his lips and how to close them.
Okay.
With the bubble. Okay, ready?
Here it goes.
Set. And he likes it. Yeah!
Oh.
Yay! Ready, set, pop. That was a great blow try, though.
I love that.
So that was Jack's first time being able to do that. Again, you know, therapy takes a long time. You're working on these things for a while, but Jack took a really purposeful inhale and exhaled and almost blew the bubble off the wand. And I should just quickly say that step one of bubble blowing for a child is not blowing a bubble through the wand, it's blowing a bubble off the wand. So Jack really was at step one there. So it was exciting. And then this is back to Finn, and Finn is, again, he's nonverbal, he's not talking, but we did this horn blowing and he coordinated his breath for it. And it's sort of almost like his voice comes out for the first time because he made a sound with his body, even though it wasn't his actual voice. So this is quick.
Okay, will you blow again for me? Here comes the train. Show me again. Wow.
And according to his mom, he didn't stop blowing that horn for a couple of days. So it's a double-edged sword, the horn, but it's helpful. Okay, so we've gotten through a lot. We've laid the foundation. Now we can work on vocalizing on command, because believe it or not, you really have to coordinate a lot. You know, you're coordinating your breath, you're moving your mouth, you're shaping sounds at this level. So don't worry, I have tips for you guys on how to do this. One of the main awesome things that I like to use, and Jean can attest to this, is Echo. Echo provides feedback to the ears, and if a child makes a sound, it comes back, they hear their sound, and they like it. So Echo microphones, I don't know, I know I'm pretty small on everyone's screen, but you can get these like at any kid's store or party store. These are great for starting to work on voicing, just doing a ah into the microphone and they can hear it back. Working in any space that has echo, so like a bathroom or a hallway. Jack and I sometimes even have been in the pool, which is really cool. So echo spaces, doing things like that. And then singing songs, leaving out a word and waiting a little bit for your child to make a noise, or reading a book and waiting, pausing for a predictable part for your child to make a sound, playing peekaboo and they could say, ah. So think about anything that might require your child to make a sound that is not yet a word. And this next video is one of my favorite videos of all time. This is Jack, who loves tickles and his legs are ticklish. And so I'm working on voicing on command with him, and we're just saying ah, but also I use tickles at the end for motivation, but also to get more voice out, because you know he's making a sound when he's laughing, and so I'm showing him how he can use his voice to communicate as well. So here's cute little Jack, and this is from a little while ago, but you can see him just learning to voice on command and control all of that.
You want it? Jack says. Very good, Jack says. That's right. Now you get it. Oh, do you want it? Very good. That was Jack says. Jack says. So good. So good. Jack says. Very good, Jack says. Good job.
I think he looks proud of himself there. So he's not, you know, the demand is not for him to say a word, but he's making a noise and getting what he wants. He's voicing and getting what he wants. So we're making that connection between I say it, I get it. I say it and I get it.
Okay, so now we're finally at the part I was talking about in the beginning. This is when we're actually shaping sounds into words and shaping our words into sentences and things like that. This is the part where articulation, so the speech, and the language start to coalesce and come together. So there's a lot of overlap in this section. And this is really where I give a lot of tips to new clients. This is what I tell them. They say, how do I get my child to start to make some sounds and some words? And if you're coming to me, then your child's probably not responding to the look at me, do what I do, say what I say approach. So you kind of have to really focus in a little bit more and figure out why that's the case. Read to your children. It's building their receptive language. Once their receptive language is built, then their expressive language comes. Again, leave out words in the stories. If it's like a Brown Bear, any Eric Carle book, any of those where they can start to have a little part in reading the book is great. Similarly, singing songs and leaving a word out in the song is a great way to start to initiate some shaping of sounds, especially like Old MacDonald, and they can maybe say a moo or a ba or a neigh for what the cow or the dog or the animal says. The third one, keep toys out of reach of children. That's a little technique we call gentle sabotage, where you're upping the ante for your child to request. So if all the toys are all around the room, they're gonna be more likely to just play by themselves. But if they have to request you to help them, then they're gonna have to communicate with you. So I don't know if you can see behind me, but I keep most all of my materials in plastic boxes with lids. So they have to, let's say, point or gesture, and then even give me a sign to open. I also pulled this book, The Hannon Approach to a guide for parents who have children with language delays. This is a great book because it really gives you a step-by-step tutorial on how to really pay attention to subtle signs that your children are communicating with you. That's something that as a speech therapist, I really spend a lot of time doing. I might have a great plan with all these oral motor goals and flutes and bubbles, and the child might see a bird out the window, and that's what's interesting to them. So we'll shift and we'll look at the bird and talk about the bird, or we'll look in the mirror for 20 minutes and make funny faces. So I think that's a great approach if you're looking to try something at home. It's a great way to kind of outline different techniques for you to do. Okay, so this is Finn, and I just wanted to give you an idea of what really intense daily therapy looks like. Finn is wishing happy birthday to his friend, I think it's Cannon. So we're seeing him on Cannon's birthday, and then a year later is the second video of him wishing Cannon a happy birthday after us doing therapy 4 times a week.
What are you gonna say? You're gonna say happy? Good job, happy birthday, Cannon. How old is Cannon today? Cannon's gonna come back and he's 11. You said 11. Can you blow a kiss?
Okay, and then a year later.
Here we go.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Cannon. Happy birthday to you.
So that's, that's the daily grind. That's what we have to do. But, with that kind of level of commitment, these are the things that kids can achieve. And this was a kid who didn't talk till 3. So I just wanted you guys to kind of have a little inspiration there to see what can happen. Okay, so that's a lot for you guys, parents at home, to do. the other aspect obviously is hiring a speech therapist, and there's certain things that we as therapists are trained to do. There are so many approaches out there, and because Pura is a relatively new, newly diagnosed syndrome, there aren't a lot of like research-based interventions for Pura specifically. That said, I use these for a number of diagnoses and a number of different children. In fact, some of these I use for even my kids who have just a little slight language delay. So I thought that these would be appropriate to share with you, just so that you could get some ideas of different therapy techniques that might apply to your child, and things that have worked. All of these I used with Finn, and all of these I'm also using with Jack. So the first one is oral placement therapy. And really, again, talking about most children learn their language with the look at me, say what I say, do what I do kind of approach. Some kids don't learn it that way, so they need more sensory input. So oral placement therapy uses tools that include touching the mouth, moving the lips. Remember I said, like, when we're popping the bubble on Jack's lip, that was him feeling his lips closing. So there's different techniques that you can do with different tools, and they're really fun. These are the bubbles and the horns, and there are vibration tools if your child does not, if they don't induce seizures. You want to make sure about vibration and seizures, but there's lots of different fun tools that you can use to work on these skills. And this is Jack learning his P sound, and you'll see he's really thinking his tongue has to be a part of it, and then eventually he realizes it doesn't. So I'm using this tool, this little yellow tool, to show him what a P sound feels like on his mouth, and then I'm giving him a couple opportunities to try it. And you'll hear at the end he gets it.
Pa, 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 pa. Now Jack does.
Working hard.
Oh, so close, Jack. Pa. Yes. Pa, 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 pa. Pa, pa, pa. Yes.
So that was
Yes. Yes. I'll give you more. Yes. Pa, 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 pa.
And then at the end, that little hand to the face, that's one of our symbols for asking for more. So, he was excited, he did it, and he got a little more. The second one you saw a little bit that I was doing with Jack, prompt. A lot of you have probably heard of this. This is a touch or manipulation approach where the therapist actually shapes the mouth so that all the child has to do is turn their voice on. Again, it teaches the motor plan for those kids who have trouble with that so that you're helping them make the sound. It takes a little bit of the responsibility away from the child, and then you fade back in their responsibility. And this is me doing prompt therapy with Finn, although we're already at the faded out level. So Finn's first word was bubble. And the prompt for B is this finger move that I'm doing. And then this is Finn's first time being able to say the word bubble without the prompt. So it's a little bit of both. And I'm just using bubbles here for motivation in this case. Here we go, more.
He's starting to say it when he pops it too. Bubble? More bubble? I didn't touch it.
So there you go. You got to see Finn and Jack kind of in all of in different levels. And then the last approach is the Kaufman speech to language protocol. And this I usually start with kids once they have some voicing on command. It looks like this. It's a big kid. It's flashcards. I can show it later when we don't have the presentation up. But basically it breaks down the words into easier parts to say and then builds them back up. So if a child couldn't, let's say the word baby, maybe they could say baby, or if they can't say mommy, they could say mama, and then eventually you work up to harder words. I don't have a video of that one, but we can talk about that if you guys have questions about that after. And then I thought I would share a couple of books that I swear by. I already showed you the third one, the Hanen Approach. It's a great guide for parents. The other one I love is Nobody Ever Told Me or My Mother That. It's by Diane Barr, and it has all of the milestones that children should be reaching, which, you know, for any kid, I don't necessarily care that they reach them at the age, you know, the average age at which they're supposed to reach them. But I think it's important still for parents and therapists to know what are the steps. So you're not skipping over huge chunks of development that they haven't acquired and expecting them to go, you know, to step 6 when they really haven't even done step 2. Going back to that house analogy where you don't build the foundation. That book is great. And I mean, I have notes in the margins and flagged. And then if you're looking for another book for parents, Look Who's Talking is a great one by Laura Dyer. And it's really, it starts at birth and goes all the way through later language development. So trying to give you guys a range. And then I did provide a couple of online resources. There we go. The American Speech and Hearing Association, if you are looking for a speech therapist and you're looking for one that is trained in certain techniques, you can go there. I provided a worksheet to the conference that helps you pick, kind of ask some good questions if you are looking for a therapist and you have the ability to ask questions and feel it out. There's some resources there. Talk Tools has a lot of the tools that I was talking about. Prompt is the touch therapy, and then the Kaufman apraxia treatment approach as well. So that's it. I feel like there's so much more to say, but I was told I had a half an hour. So I tried to narrow it down as much as possible. I'm so excited and thankful that I got to present today, and I hope that you found this information helpful. I also wanted to provide my contact information. I'll leave that up for a few minutes. I'm sure it's on the Puro website as well, but you know, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or you're looking for recommendations or referrals. That's where you can go. I'll throw it back.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rachel. That was incredibly informative, and I love the examples you showed, and it's just amazing to see, again, your sort of can-do attitude. If this doesn't work, we try this, and if this doesn't work, we do that, which I think all of us parents really appreciate, given everything. So I am going to go ahead and pull up our first question from the chat. I would like to know if a child who needs to develop fine motor skills needs an occupational therapist, or if that is something an SLP can have in the treatment plan.
Great question. So fine motor skills definitely are an area that OTs work on. That is a major area. And then speech is an example of one kind of fine motor skill. So I am a very, very collaborative speech therapist. And what I do is, so basically my recommendation is both. OTs look at the whole body, and they're looking at fine motor skills for the whole body. Speech therapists are looking at fine motor skills in the mouth. So what I do is I always am talking to the occupational therapist who's working with that child and saying kind of where are they in different levels, and then I apply that to the mouth. One of the sort of rules in my profession is whatever's happening in the body is happening in the mouth. So if a child, let's say, has weak muscle tone in the body, they're going to have weak muscle tone in the mouth. And the OT really is more the expert who's going to have those diagnoses and things like that. But then I want to
take her information and apply it to what I'm working on. So if a child has weak muscle tone in the body, I'm going to be working on some jaw strengthening exercises. I'm going to be working on straw drinking to increase the muscle ability in the lips and things like that. I think that one of the main things when you're thinking about therapists is getting therapists that collaborate and coordinate with each other. That is so key. Team meetings, I'm constantly a part of. Now it's Zoom meetings or, phone calls or email chains, because, my little specialty coordinates with their specialty, but in the end, we're looking at the whole child. So I need that physical therapist to say, they really can't bring their hands to midline to clap. So if I'm working on motor imitation, I know that's something I shouldn't be working on with them because physically that's not where they are. So working in concert with the two is great. So fine motor skills for the body is what the OT should work on. Fine motor skills in the mouth is what your speech and feeding therapist should work on.
Thanks, Rachel. That was very helpful. We have another question in the chat from Rome. My daughter Victoria is 12 years old. And essentially, I think what's being asked here, is it possible for a 12-year-old to learn speech or how to speak? So that's sort of my interpretation of that question.
Yeah, so the answer I think is yes. Again, I think that I would go back to some of those foundational skills and really assess, can she imitate body movements? If so, go to the next step. Can she imitate oral motor movements? If she can, how is her breath support? And really focus on those foundational skills. A lot of times what happens, and this is, I think, what I was alluding to before is, because they get older, the team says, well, the expectation is this, or, the developmental milestone is here, but really, where is the child? And build up the child from where they are. And one of the beautiful things about that I've found is that when you meet the child where they are, and when you figure out that point of success, then that child feels successful, and then they're able to do more, and you're building their confidence and you're building the skills, and you can get so much more out of them. Therapy takes a long time. I mean, it's definitely, Jean can attest to this, like it's a daily grind. You're not seeing, the video of Finn with the birthday message. I mean, that was a year of a lot of work, but we got him there. I just took on another child on my caseload who's on the autism spectrum disorder spectrum, and he was only kind of saying one word, and I was able to get him through some visuals and things like that to saying 3-word sentences, and that was I think he's 10. So just start do kind of your mini home assessment, start where she is and build those foundational skills. And you never know what you can achieve from there.
Thank you for that. We have a few more questions coming in through our Q&A box. Until what age, I know you just got at this a little bit, until what age does speech therapy make sense? How many sessions a week? How long? How do you know when it's too much for the child?
That's a good question. So really an initial assessment between a speech therapist and the child is really helpful to determine the frequency and then duration. When I'm taking on a new client, I typically see younger kids for a half an hour, and then between 3 and 4 years old, I can kind of switch to 45 minutes depending on their attention. Also, depending on like if we're doing feeding and speech and language, then we have a lot to cover. I change the activity very frequently. So we could be working on, let's say I'm working on breath support. We might do 3 minutes of bubble blowing and then 3 minutes of horn blowing and then 3 minutes of another thing. So I'm changing the activity rapidly, but can still work on the same underlying core skill. So really, I mean, I see kids typically 1 to 2 times a week. And then if it's someone who needs a little more, it's going to be 3 to 4 times a week. 5 times a week is kind of that's in the intense range. And then really the determination though basically is made on what level of therapy do I need to provide for this child to have success. So let's say I'm seeing a child once a week and it's kind of trudging along, then I might say we need to up the ante a little bit. Really, you're looking at how much therapy do they need for success. And I happen to come from a public school background where what is the least amount of therapy they need to make success. So I tend to still think that way. I try not to bombard kids because there is an over-therapized situation out there. I think that has to do also with how many needs do they have? Are they seeing like an occupational therapist 5 times a week and a, speech therapist 5 times and all of that? So, something to consider is sometimes we tend to hold these kids to a bit of a higher standard than we do other kids, because we're so excited and passionate and hopeful about all this progress. And yet they still have to be kids too. And they still have to have downtime and hang out with their brothers and sisters and go swimming in the summer. And, so it's really hard to strike that balance. I think that in general, you want to provide just what they need to have success, but talk with sort of and that's, I think, where the team comes in play as well. You could say to the team, okay, what can we do here? Sometimes I'll co-treat with another provider. So they're working on physical therapy and I'm working on speech at the same time, or that kind of thing. And that helps to support the child. It gives them more downtime. And it also is tremendously helpful for the therapy and for the therapists, because like, for example, the physical therapist can be holding a child in a really optimal position for breath support. And then I could be working on bubble blowing and horn blowing for breath support as well. So if you can do co-treat sessions, I think that's a great way to go as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We've certainly had the benefit of that, and being able to also cross over teams between people who we are seeing privately with people who are coming through, CPSE or early intervention. So we're getting a lot of questions, very exciting. One question that came in through the website, which is always top of mind for a lot of our families. What are your thoughts around a communications device? What would be the right age or time to introduce such a thing? If you could say a little bit about that.
Sure. So I definitely work with kids who have communication devices. It's not like my personal area of expertise. So typically if I have a child who wants or needs that, I refer to somebody who that's all they do. That said, I use a lot of different communication devices in my practice. And some of them are high tech, some of them are low tech. So sometimes I have a picture exchange communication system where, let's say the child is requesting milk. I would have a picture of milk, they'd give me the picture, and then I would give them the milk. That's a very low tech communication system that can be done as early as the child can gesture. There's also one button communication devices, or I actually have one here because I don't know if I should tell this story, but I will. This one says treat because I got a dog and I read that you can teach your dog to request using these one buttons. And so they push their nose and it says treat. I use this with a lot of kids too, which is why I happen to have it. So you can record anything onto this button. And if the child wants something, instead of pointing or gesturing, they can push the button, it says it, and then they get it. So what you're doing is you're stimulating that language center of the brain, even though they may not be able to say the word from a motor perspective. So going back to articulation, they may not be able to form the word more, but they understand the concept. I want more of this thing, this motivating thing. And so they can learn that they can do this and get more. And what's great about communication devices is they still stimulate the language center of the brain. So you're still building that cognitive system up, and you're compensating for what they can't, let's say, do from a motor perspective. You're giving them another way. I tend to use more of a total communication approach. So yes, they're using a communication device. ProLoQ is a very popular one, where it's symbol based and they can pick their symbols. But if I'm doing that, they're probably also working on verbal language. They're probably also using some sign language. So they're using a lot of different modalities so that they don't have this one approach to rely on. Because what happens if you forget your communication device one day, or it breaks or something like that? So certainly as young as a child who's able to push a button could use a low-tech device like this. And then the other key thing is when you're doing a communication device, I really like to make sure that it's really functional words. So a lot of parents say, like, I want my kids to know colors and numbers, and that's great. But, and I think that has a place, and that's later on, but it should really be words like, you know, potty and water and food and you know, I do or I want, things like that, so that they have a really functional way to communicate using the device. I think I hit all the like little questions in there, but
Yeah, this is always one that you know, we all talk about a lot. Another question from our Q&A box here: what are oral motor exercises to control drooling?
I love this because it comes up a lot. And I meet a lot of babies who are just wearing really wet bibs. And I say to parents on the first session, like, we're going to take care of this. This is not going to continue. So drooling could be caused by two things. One is they could have an excess of saliva. There could be something medically going on. Some medications can cause dry mouth or excessive drooling. I always know what medications my clients are on so that I can kind of be aware of these things. Going back to collaboration, you need to talk to the medical team. But really, drooling typically is children who have an open mouth posture or open mouth at rest. So these kids who are kind of these guys. So what do you do for that? You work on exercises that close the mouth. I have a couple things pulled because these are just my tools that I use all the time. So Talk Tools makes a really cool straw kit that looks like this. And they are straws. They're cute. They're kid straws. There's an adult, you know, they get into just like kind of fun straws that are not so cutesy, but normal things that we could use. But using a straw is a great way to strengthen the lip muscle. The lip muscle it's a sphincter, and so it's round, and then the cheek muscles insert into it. So if you are drinking from a straw, you're exercising those muscles, and those kinds of exercises bring the mouth closed so that you're controlling drool with inside the mouth. Another great way is doing anything that you have to bite and hold. So like I use these, and you can get these on Amazon, these flavored tongue depressors, and you can hold it in the mouth. If you have like an older kid who's still drooling, those are good activities. Any of the blowing activities will work on drooling, but really what you need to do is you need to get head upright and you need to get the mouth closed. So drinking from an open cup is another way to work on that. That brings the lips down. Holding something, Jean knows about these little toothets are great. You can have them squeeze it and open it. So you're really drooling is about strengthening the lips, closing the lips at rest, and allowing them to control that drool inside their mouth. There's other factors too, like if they have any swallow issues, you would have to work on that. That's a little more involved. If there is an excess of, saliva management, that kind of thing. But most of the time when I see a kid wearing a bib, I start to work on any exercise or any technique that closes the mouth and strengthens that lip so that the saliva is not pooling out of the front. I just assessed a client the other day who the parents were like, he can't drink anything. He can't drink anything. And he was drinking, and then, but they would squirt the water in his mouth, but his lips never closed. And so all the liquid would just come right out. So we did a couple of like therapeutic jaw holds like that and worked on teaching him to close his mouth. And within, a couple of tries, he was able to get it. So it's all about closing the mouth. And that's where if you had a speech therapist who's trained in orofunctional myology, we work on that a lot.
Thank you. That's something obviously big concern in our community. How does positioning affect speech production in our kids that have typically such low tone? What suggestions would you have to address that issue?
So it's huge. When you are when you're in the wrong position, your body is out of alignment. So like when I see kids who are drinking and they're hyperextended and they're drinking, like this, things are just completely out of whack. And the same thing goes with speech. Number one, if you don't have stability, then you can't have mobility. So if I'm in a chair and my feet aren't touching the floor and I have no place to put my arms, then I'm compensating in my body in other places. That's going to make it harder for me to speak. Going back to even vocalization and voicing, if I'm sitting in an improper chair, then I'm really squeezing my stomach muscles to keep my body straight. And when I do that, I can't get as much breath support for controlled speech. So I'm gonna speak on a shorter breath span. So number one, I put kids in a high chair if need be, or any kind of chair that fits. A lot of parents have those like little kid easy chairs. I don't know how to, they're like the rolled arm chair. So the main thing, if you're working on speech, feet flat on the floor, that provides stability for the trunk and for the lower half of the body. And then if your child has weak muscle tone, they're probably going to be slouching this way, or they're going to be doing something to compensate. So you want to keep them nice and tight, body in proper alignment, and that's going to align everything internally so that they can speak. And then the other thing is, they're not then holding anything really tight in their body so that they can't necessarily say the sound. So if I have to hold my neck tight to keep my body straight up here, I'm going to have tension in my neck, and it's going to be harder for me to make sounds and to control my voice. And my voice, I will fatigue quickly because I'm overcompensating using those compensatory strategies.
Thank you. Well, we're getting so many good questions. If it's okay with you, would love to go a few minutes over, just because we're getting a great response. New question we just got. Do you have any tips on releasing the mouth after closing it around a straw, per se?
Releasing the mouth after closing it around the straw. I'm not sure what's being asked. Let's see, releasing. So if a child is having trouble rounding their lips around the straw, what I tend to do is use what's called a V hold. So I hold my fingers this way, put it under the jaw, and then I push it up. And then I also pull it back down. If they're having trouble with, we call it like gradation of movement of the jaw. If that's the case, then I would probably start with jaw exercises before really focusing on the straw. So I might help them work on some jaw opening and closing exercises that would help the child know how to open and close their jaw. And there, you can do that with, even with tongue depressors, you can have them bite the side of a tongue depressor and then increase, so tape or glue them together so that you have a larger amount, so that they have to open their jaw more, and then sort of teach that you can open and progressively close your jaw. I think
we got a little bit of a follow-up. So Riker drinks from a straw, but then he bites it and won't or can't open his mouth again to release the straw.
Biting the straw. Yeah. So what I would do is I would definitely switch to a hard straw. I really hate these cups that are great for on the go, but they're terrible for feeding and speech development. So when you have like the 360 cup that you have to bite the corner of, it's great because it doesn't spill, but it's terrible for teaching kids how to drink. Same with the straw. Those straws that you bite on all of these like sippy-ish cups, those are convenient, but they're not very good for teaching drinking. So any of these straws that are made out of like a hard plastic, biting doesn't help to get the liquid out. So you actually have to teach the reverse of what he's doing. So he might still bite, but what you do is you put something on the front of it. Here we go, called like a lip block, but you can put something here that prevents him from putting it so far into his mouth that he bites it. So it only can go to the lips like that. And so then he'll learn to drink from a straw without biting. A lot of kids with difficulty with jaw opening and closing issues will bite. Straw biting is a huge thing that I deal with in my practice. I even like these metal straws that I'm using now, because you can bite all you want, but it's not going to help you get the liquid out. And when you're not biting, you're actually exercising the lips, right? But you're not increasing the need to bite and chew. If he likes to bite and chew, I would give him something that's appropriate to chew, and there's lots of recommendations for that. But I would switch to a hard straw, and I would switch to a straw that has something that prevents him from putting it so far into his mouth that he can bite it.
Another good one here. Our kids typically do a lot of chewing and mouthing of objects. How can we as parents deal with / address this issue in a constructive way?
Okay, I love that question. So typically when children are chewing, well, there's a typical phase for babies when they mouth objects, and we want to encourage that. But if you're beyond that developmentally, maybe chronologically you're past it, but if your child is there developmentally, you encourage that. That's the mouthing phase. Beyond that, whatever they're trying to seek from a sensory perspective, some input. So we all typically, most of us do things with our mouths that are sensory seeking behaviors. We bite our fingernails, we chew pen caps. These are things we'll do in meetings to help us like pay attention. So usually you're trying to regulate your system by chewing and biting things. One thing that I love, if your child is old enough, is there's a gum chewing method that a therapist can teach. I don't recommend a parent do it, where you use like gauze and you put the gum in the gauze so they can chew it, but then you take it out and eventually they learn not to swallow the wads of gum. But I would replace it with something that is functional. So if your child is really going for, hard things, maybe that's when, if they have clearance to eat this, then I might give them a really chewy, hard food, maybe a beef jerky or like a carrot or something like that. If they are mouthing and they just seem like they're tired and they're just, something's in there and they're just gnawing at it, Then you want to wake up the sensory system. So you want to give them something crunchy. So there I would recommend like a pretzel stick or a veggie straw or a pretzel rod or something that really gives that same sensory feedback, but is more of a functional thing, because you want to address the underlying cause, the underlying reason why they're doing it, and make it functional.
I think we'll take a couple more here, and then we will definitely get back to everyone on if your question is not answered, so don't worry. How helpful are flashcards in improving speech? What is the technique for using such flashcards?
Okay, I'm a huge fan of flashcards, and as a young therapist, I thought like kids would hate flashcards, like it's so boring, but kids love flashcards, especially when done right. So the Kaufman cards are flashcards, and let me show you, for example, how it works, and then I'll talk about flashcards in general. So this is level 1 of the Kaufman cards, and they're divided based on how children typically acquire words. So most kids' first words are mama, dada, baba. So it's a consonant, vowel, same, same consonant, vowel. But some kids can't start there. So this card is for nay, nay, okay? So, but you could start, if they can't say nay, nay, you kind of work your way down, and you might even just start with nah. And so the child sees the card and they say nah, and you say, great job, it's amazing, you did great. And they feel really good about themselves. And then you move to the next card and you do it again. And then eventually you work up. So this is where you're taking a word and you're really breaking it down. That's an easier one. Here's one. This is tummy hurt. They get pretty complex. So this was me, huh. So we're really breaking down the motor demand into something that's much easier for the child to say. And then you slowly work your way back up, or not so slowly, work your way back up so that they can learn how to say these words. And what I love about it is that it breaks it down, builds it up, but it also follows the developmental curve. So one of the things that I always keep in mind, I'm meeting the child where they are, but I'm always thinking through it from a developmental perspective. So I'm not going to expect a child to say, mommy, go, if they can't say, and then they can't say ma, and then they can't say mama. And so I'm building those things up, but within the framework of how does a typically developing child typically acquire this language? Okay, that said, I make flashcards for probably 90% of my clients, and so they're personalized, which I think is different than using like a commercially bought flashcard. But we typically do, let's say you do 2 words and you get a goldfish cracker, or you do 2 words and then you get tickles, or whatever is motivating to them. We do a couple and then you get a reward. The other thing with flashcards, it's predictable and it's the same. So they can have success doing something that they know is going to be the same every time. If I say to a kid, do you want milk? And they say milk, that's great. But then the next time I might have a different question, and then the answer is expected to be the same. But if we're doing flashcards, you see it, you say milk, you see it, you say milk. So it's repetition. And for kids with oral motor difficulties, the key therapy there is repetition. And so in that respect, flashcards are great. And then the other key with flashcards is be the toy when you're doing flashcards. So I'm very gregarious when it comes to flashcards and when it comes to the child saying it correctly. So, I make it a very personal and exciting experience for the kids. Things you can do with flashcards too, I know I'm talking a lot about flashcards, it gets me excited, is you can like
pace them around the room and have a scavenger hunt. You could make 2 sets and have them match the flashcards. You can laminate them and put them in the tub. So, you can take Play-Doh and smash it on a flashcard. There's thousands of ways that you can use flashcards in a fun way that's not just, flashcard.
I love it. You're giving me lots of ideas. So I think we'll do one more question. And I also just want to remind everyone that all of the different resources here are going to be available on the conference website under the tab resources. And I know Rachel shared her information at the outset as well. So don't worry. This is not the final chance to ask questions. So last but not least, what age do you think is a good age to consider introducing sign language?
Oh, super young. Baby signs were really popular for a while. I think they still are. I encourage parents to use them all the time. Similar to an augmentative communication device, when you are teaching signs, you're stimulating that same language center of the brain. So you're building expressive language when articulation is difficult. So I always am teaching the young, 6 months, I'm working with kids on more or all done or give me or play, drink, anything like that. I typically tell parents, pick one to start with, get it under your belt, and then go from there. I think that signs are incredibly helpful and effective because it gives children a way to communicate that compensates for what they can't do. So you could most kids can probably bring their hands to midline and do 2 taps or for more. Sometimes kids do this. I think Jack does this. So whatever it is, you can make your own. But you're stimulating the language center of the brain, which is so important. And the earlier that you do that, the brain is so plastic and malleable that you can build up that center. And then when their fine motor skill of speech is developed through all these tools and games and all of that, then you can make that connection between this is more and then also this is more. And they already have that way. You can fade out the sign and then just have the word. But my whole thing is, I shouldn't say my whole thing. One of my main things that I like to do is, what is the most functional kind of communication I can put in place for this child now? So if they don't have a way to say more, can they tap a button and say more and get what they want? And once kids learn that I can do this and I receive that thing that I got, they get it. They start to get it. And then you can expand out from there and you can add, lots of different signs, or you can add buttons, or you can add, words, but you're able to compensate. You're able to provide a way for them to communicate and compensate for something that is more difficult for them. So I would get a baby sign book or go online. I know, Jean, you had a program that you used too.
Baby signing times. And I actually learned about that at the last conference. You were raving about that.
Yeah. So I would start as early as possible. And the other thing with signing is do it in front of the child. So if they're not at the level where they're signing it, every time you say, oh, you want a drink, and you do the drink. So you're always your child's model, always for language. So even if they're not doing it, incorporate the signs with what you're saying, and they'll make that connection. It doesn't hold them back. It helps them progress further.
Thank you, Rachel. I think we could go on, but we are going to wrap there. Thank you so much for an amazing session. I think all these questions have been terrific, and it's a really engaged audience today. We've recorded the session. It will be available on the website resource tab within 48 hours. Thanks to everyone for being a part of this today. Don't miss the next session, Advocacy Advice. No is just the beginning. And check your daily schedule or visit the website for a link to that session. Thank you so much, Rachel. This was amazing.
This was really fun for me. So thank you so much.
Thanks.